They told us my father died in a hiking accident in Alaska, but the classified files I uncovered reveal a government conspiracy to hide what's really happening beneath those hypnotic northern lights while keeping us distracted with Area 51 rumors. Why would federal agents kill to keep you from discovering what's actually hiding in the restricted zones of southern Alaska? My fingers trembled as I pulled Dad's dusty journal from the storage box. 20 years since he vanished in Alaska, and the government still stuck to their hiking accident story. The leather cover felt warm, like it held secrets waiting to burst free. Thunder crashed outside my Seattle apartment, rain lashing against windows as if nature itself was warning me to stop digging. "You shouldn't be doing this, Jolie," my roommate Riley warned from the doorway, arms crossed protectively over her chest. "Every time you dig into your dad's disappearance, you end up in a dark place. Remember last year when you got fired for hacking into government databases? Or the restraining order from that poor meteorologist you accused of covering up atmospheric anomalies?" She wasn't wrong. 3 therapists and countless sleepless nights could confirm that. But something about that viral post, the one claiming Area 51, was just a smokescreen for something bigger in Alaska, sent electric shivers through my body. Same area where Dad vanished. Same strange light patterns he documented in his research. Too specific to be coincidence, too detailed to be random internet nonsense. "I'm fine," I lied, flipping through pages of Dad's messy handwriting, past his atmospheric readings and aurora borealis observations that had once been dismissed as the ravings of an obsessed scientist. The government had returned his personal effects, but kept all his official research, claiming national security concerns, another red flag I'd ignored for too long. Dad's journal fell open to a page I'd somehow never noticed before, a page with a map of southern Alaska, coordinates marked in red, and 3 words that made my blood freeze. "They're not stars." Below it, a hurried scrawl. "Aurora doorways. They're coming through. Trust no one in uniform." The handwriting became increasingly erratic, desperate strokes pressing deep into the paper, like he'd been afraid someone might stop him from recording his discovery. The thunder outside suddenly felt too perfectly timed, like the universe confirming a horrible truth as lightning briefly illuminated old photos on my wall. Dad and me at his research station, both of us smiling, unaware of what was coming. Dad wasn't crazy. He'd found something real, something that frightened him enough to hide clues in a personal journal rather than his official reports. My phone buzzed on the table, screen lighting up with an unknown number from an Alaska area code. Riley raised an eyebrow as I hesitated, then finally answered with a shaky, "Hello? Jolie Anderson?" A man's voice whispered, raspy and urgent, background noise suggesting he was moving quickly, perhaps running. "Don't say my name. They might be listening. I worked with your father on Project Sapphire. I don't have much time. They've tracked this call already." My pulse skyrocketed as Riley moved closer, concern etched across her face. Project Sapphire, Dad's classified research assignment before he vanished, never mentioned in any official records, only in private conversations we'd had when I was a teenager and he'd had too much whiskey. The government had denied its existence when I'd mentioned it during the investigation into his disappearance. "How did you get this number?" I demanded, grabbing a pen to write down anything important, adrenaline suddenly making everything sharper, clearer. "That viral post about Area 51 in Alaska, did you make it? It's causing panic in certain classified circles, bringing unwanted attention to sites we've kept hidden for decades." The man continued, ignoring my question as his breathing grew more labored. "Someone's trying to expose the truth. They're cleaning house. 3 former Sapphire scientists dead this week. Accidents, just like your father's." His voice cracked with genuine fear. "I'm next. They're outside my door right now." A chill ran down my spine as a sharp bang echoed through the phone, followed by splintering wood and muffled shouting. Riley's eyes widened as she mouthed, "What's happening?" But I couldn't answer, paralyzed by the sounds of struggle coming through the line. "Listen carefully," the man hissed between what sounded like running footsteps. "Your dad hid evidence. The pendant he gave you for your 16th birthday, it's not just jewelry. It's a key. The aurora isn't natural. It's a door." His words cut off with a horrible gurgling sound, followed by something heavy hitting the floor. Distant voices approached, professional and calm. "Target neutralized. Search for the device." The line went dead as my hand instinctively reached for the blue crystal pendant I'd worn every day since Dad disappeared. the one the authorities had surprisingly let me keep when they confiscated everything else from his research. I'd always thought it was just a pretty stone that reminded me of the northern lights he loved so much. Now its familiar weight felt dangerous, important. Riley stood frozen in my doorway, face pale with shock. "Jolie, what's going on? Who was that? You look like you've seen a ghost." Before I could answer, my laptop pinged with a new email notification. No sender name, just a string of numbers. Subject line: Ferris Anderson file. Classified. The timestamp showed it had been sent seconds after the phone call ended, as if triggered by the caller's death. "Someone's watching me," I whispered, suddenly aware of the small red light on my smoke detector that had never been there before, its steady blink now seeming sinister rather than reassuring. Riley followed my gaze upward, her expression changing from confusion to alarm as she too noticed the unusual addition to my ceiling. The attached file contained a single documenter government report about unusual atmospheric activity in southern Alaska, most text blacked out with heavy redaction. All details hidden, except one sentence circled in red. Specimen retrieved exhibits biological characteristics, inconsistent with any known terrestrial life form. And at the bottom, a photo of my father standing in front of a metal door marked Project Sapphire, his arm around a familiar face-me current boss, Angus Fletcher, the man who had suspiciously assigned me to debunk the Area 51, Alaska conspiracy theory for Science Today magazine just yesterday. The man who'd hired me 3 years ago, claiming he'd never met my father. My phone buzzed again with a text from another unknown number. "They're coming for the pendant. Get out now. Take nothing but the journal and what you're wearing. Your apartment has been compromised for months." As if synchronized by some invisible conductor, car doors slammed outside my apartment building, followed by quick, purposeful footsteps in the stairwell. Not the casual shuffle of neighbors, but the coordinated movement of professionals. My pendant seemed to grow warmer against my skin, as Riley backed away from the door in growing panic. "We need to go," I told her, grabbing my laptop and Dad's journal, shoving both into my bag along with my wallet and the burner phone I'd kept since my last paranoid episode. "Right now. Through the fire escape. Don't ask questions." "What? Why?" "You're scaring me, Jolie. This isn't like your other conspiracy spirals. This feels dangerous." Riley's voice trembled as she backed toward my bedroom window that led to the fire escape, her eyes never leaving the front door. A hard knock rattled the apartment entrance, authoritative and impatient. "Miss Anderson, federal agents. We need to ask you some questions about your father's research. Please open the door." I grabbed Riley's hand and pulled her toward the fire escape, rain still pouring outside like nature's perfect getaway cover. "Remember how I always said Dad wasn't crazy? I think I'm about to prove it. But you don't have to come with me, this isn't your fight." The knocking became aggressive, pounding that threatened to break the hinges. "Miss Anderson, open the door immediately. We have a warrant." Multiple shadows now visible through the peephole suggested at least 4 agents outside, maybe more in the building. As we slipped out the window into the pouring rain, my pendant began to glow with an unnatural blue light, the same color as the Alaskan aurora in Dad's photos. The light pulsed in rhythm with the thunder, almost like it was responding to the electrical energy in the atmosphere, or perhaps to my fear as the sound of my front door being breached echoed behind us. And somehow, I knew with bone-deep certainty that nothing in my life would ever be the same. That the conspiracy I'd been chasing for 20 years was worse and more real than I had ever imagined. Flight 2207 to Juneau now boarding at Gate 16. The airport announcement made my heart jump into my throat as I pulled my borrowed hoodie lower over my face, careful to avoid the security cameras lining the terminal ceiling. 48 hours on the run had left dark circles under my eyes and a constant twitch in my right hand, my body running on convenience store coffee and the kind of fear that makes sleeping impossible. Every passing TSA agent, every face that lingered too long on mine, felt like a potential threat in the busy Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. Riley had bailed after the first night in a cheap motel outside the city, her initial loyalty crumbling under the weight of reality when she saw the news report about a mentally unstable woman wanted for questioning regarding stolen government documents and possible connection to an Alaska man's murder. "This is insane, Jolie," she'd said, packing her few belongings with trembling hands while avoiding my eyes. "Just talk to the feds. They probably just want information about the man who called you. They mentioned reward money for helping find you. But the look in her eyes told me she thought I was having another breakdown, another Jolie Anderson spiral into conspiracy land that would end with more therapy and possibly jail time this time. Maybe she was right, but the glowing pendant and the 3 dead scientists mentioned in the mysterious call weren't things I could ignore or rationalize away. Neither was the fact that when I looked up those scientists online at a public library computer, each one had indeed died in the past week: a car accident with brake failure, a home invasion where nothing was stolen, a hiking mishap in perfectly clear weather. Just like Dad. Too many coincidences creating a pattern I couldn't unsee. The gate attendant gave my hastily purchased fake ID a longer look than comfortable before nodding me through, her eyes flicking between my face and the driver's license photo of Joy Miller, purchased from a former college classmate who specialized in digital forgeries. My real passport was back at my apartment, now likely in federal hands, along with everything else I owned except the clothes on my back, Dad's journal, and the pendant that had stopped glowing once the storm passed, but now felt unnaturally warm against my skin as I approached Alaska airspace. As I settled into my window seat on the small commuter plane, the bearded man next to me smiled with genuine warmth that seemed out of place, given my current circumstances. Flannel shirt, weathered hands, friendly eyes that crinkled at the Cornish, looked like he belonged on a hiking trail rather than a cramped airplane. "First time to Alaska?" he asked, his deep voice carrying notes of the wilderness, earthy and reassuring. "Is it that obvious?" I clutched my backpack tighter, positioning it on my lap rather than under the seat where someone might grab it. Inside were Dad's journal, my laptop with the classified file, and 3 burner phones purchased with cash from different convenience stores across Seattle. "You've got that wide-eyed, nervous look of someone about to meet the last frontier for the first time," he explained, his smile revealing slightly crooked teeth. "Nothing to worry about, though. Alaska's big enough that everyone can find their own space, their own purpose." He extended a calloused hand across the armrest. "Leif Carson, park ranger with the Forest Service, Tongass Division. Great. Government employee. Potential threat. Joy." I lied, accepting his handshake briefly before pulling away, using my fake ID name while scanning his uniform for any signs of deception. "Tourist. First vacation in years. What brings you up north this time of year?" "Most folks come in summer, though the aurora season is just starting if you're interested in night photography." His eyes briefly dropped to my chest where the pendant rested beneath my sweatshirt, then back to my face with such casual smoothness I almost thought I'd imagined it. My pendant seemed to pulse warmer against my chest at the mention of the lights, a sensation both comforting and alarming as I shifted uncomfortably in my seat. Just exploring. Needed a change of scenery, somewhere different from city life. Best be careful exploring on your own. Easy to get lost in the Tongass if you don't know what you're doing. That's where I work the National Forest Preserve. Beautiful but dangerous for solo travelers. His tone remained conversational, but something in the way he studied my reaction felt calculated, almost like an interrogation disguised as friendly conversation. The same area marked in Dad's journal with those mysterious coordinates. My pulse quickened as I tried to maintain a neutral expression. "Any restricted areas in the preserve? Places tourists can't go? I heard there were some research facilities or military installations out there." His smile didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted slightly, an alertness that hadn't been there before, like a predator catching an interesting scent. "Plenty of dangerous terrain we keep folks away from for their own safety. Military has some old Cold War stuff nobody cares about anymore." "Why do you ask? Planning to go off the usual trails?" "Just curious about government secrets," I said, attempting a joke that fell flat in the tense air between us. My dad was into conspiracy theories rubbed off on me, I guess. Leif's laugh sounded hollow, practiced rather than genuine. "Like what? Aliens hiding in the woods instead of Area 51? Bigfoot research stations? Secret weather control devices?" The hair on my arm stood up beneath my hoodie. I hadn't mentioned Area 51 or weather, both key elements in Dad's research, and the viral post that had started this nightmare. This wasn't random conversation anymore. "Something like that," I mumbled, turning toward the window to hide my expression, watching clouds pass beneath us as my mind raced through possibilities. Government agent testing me? Another scientist who knew Dad? Someone connected to whatever killed the caller? Funny thing about conspiracies, Leaf continued, his voice lower now, meant only for my ears despite the engine noise and chattering passengers around us. Sometimes they exist because folks need to make sense of things they don't understand. Like the Northern Lights. Indigenous people thought they were spirits of ancestors. Scientists say it's just solar particles hitting the magnetosphere. But what if both are wrong? I stared at his reflection in the window, trying to read his intent without turning around and revealing my growing alarm. Was he testing me? Threatening me? Helping me? The pendant grew uncomfortably hot against my skin. What would they be then? I asked, keeping my voice casual despite my racing heart. Doorways, maybe. He smiled again when I whipped my head around, unable to hide my shock at hearing that specific word again. At least, that's what some of the old legends say. The lights open pathways between worlds when the conditions are right, when certain keys are present. The same word from Dad's journal, from the mysterious caller who died delivering his message. Doorways. Not coincidence anymore, but confirmation. Dangerous and exhilarating at once. This man knew something real, something connected to Dad's disappearance and the government's desperate attempts to recover my pendant. The plane hit turbulence without warning, shaking violently enough that oxygen masks dropped from overhead compartments. The fasten seatbelt sign dinged on as the cabin lights flickered, plunging us into momentary darkness as passengers gasped and crew members hurried down the aisles with reassurances that all was normal. Just mountain weather patterns. For just a moment, in that darkness, I swore Leaf's eyes reflected light like an animal's, a quick, eerie green glow that vanished when the cabin lights stabilized. His expression remained unreadable as he calmly pushed his oxygen mask aside without using it, while other passengers nervously adjusted theirs. When the lights returned to normal, he was writing something on a napkin with deliberate, unhurried movements. He slid it to me without looking my way. Since you're interested in restricted areas, this might help your tourism, though I'd recommend sticking to authorized trails for your own safety. Coordinates. The exact ones from Dad's journal, written in the same format with a small symbol beside them that matched a drawing on my father's map, something that looked like a stick figure with too many arms beneath a wavy line. If you go there, he whispered, eyes now fixed on the seat in front of him rather than me. Go at night, when the lights are active, and wear that pretty pendant you're hiding under your shirt. It might keep you safe from things most tourists never have to worry about. My blood ran cold as my hand instinctively covered the pendant through my clothing. Who are you, really? I demanded, past caring about maintaining my cover. How do you know about this? The plane jolted again, harder this time, a violent shudder that seemed to come from inside the aircraft rather than turbulence. The overhead bins popped open despite their locked status, sending bags and personal items tumbling down onto passengers. Emergency lights flashed as people screamed and flight attendants struggled to maintain order amidst the chaos. In the confusion, Leaf leaned close to my ear, his breath warm against my skin. Someone who knew your father, Jolie Anderson. Someone who knows what happened to him wasn't an accident. And someone who can help you find him, if you're brave enough to follow where the lights lead. Ice flooded my veins at the sound of my real name on his lips. Not a coincidence he was seated beside me. Not a chance encounter. Everything about this flight suddenly felt orchestrated, as if I'd been herded toward this moment, this man, this revelation. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're experiencing unusual electromagnetic interference with our navigation systems. Please remain calm while we attempt to stabilize the aircraft and reroute to the nearest available airport. This is standard procedure for these conditions. The plane's electronics died completely mid-announcement, cutting off the captain's reassurances. Total darkness engulfed the cabin, except for the unnatural blue glow now emanating from my pendant bright enough to illuminate not just my own face but Leaf's beside me. His expression no longer friendly but urgent, almost pleading as other passengers gasped at the light pulsing from beneath my sweatshirt. They know you're coming, he said, nodding toward my glowing jewelry. The pendant is activating because we're getting close to a doorway. It's trying to connect with its other half. Who knows I'm coming? What doorway? Who are you really? How do you know my father? The questions tumbled out as panic rose in my chest, heightened by the fearful stares of nearby passengers now focused on the supernatural light I couldn't hide. Your father wasn't taken, Jolie. He went through willingly. Leaf's expression softened with something like compassion. and he's been waiting for 20 years for someone with the second key to follow. The plane's system suddenly came back online with a series of beeps and rebooting sounds, normal lighting returning as my pendant's glow faded back to dormancy. The captain announced over the intercom that we were making an emergency landing at a small airfield just outside Juneau due to equipment malfunctions, his calm professional tone belied by the slight shake in his voice. As passengers murmured in relief around us, I noticed through my window that black SUVs were already waiting on the tarmac, the same kind that had chased me from my Seattle apartment. Positioned strategically around the small runway with men in tactical gear standing beside them, faces turned upward toward our descending aircraft. "Those aren't airport security," Leaf whispered, following my gaze. "When we land, follow me if you want answers about your father. I have a vehicle on the other side of the airfield. We can reach the coordinates before nightfall if we hurry." "Why should I trust you?" I hissed, torn between desperate hope and survival instinct as the ground approached beneath us. "You could be working with them. This could all be an elaborate setup to get my pendant. Because I'm the only one who can show you what's on the other side of the aurora." He nodded at my chest where the pendant lay hidden again. "That's only half the key. Your father has the other half. Without both pieces, the doorway remains sealed. My father is dead." The words came out louder than intended, drawing curious glances from across the aisle as the plane's landing gear extended with a mechanical groan. Leaf's smile returned, sad and knowing like a parent about to reveal a difficult truth to a child. "Is he? Did you ever see a body? Did they ever find any physical evidence he died on that mountain? Or did they just tell you he was gone while they kept searching the area for years afterward?" As the plane descended toward the waiting vehicles, my mind raced with impossible hopes and terrible fears, memories of childhood moments when Dad had talked about the aurora as something alive, something watching us from another place. If he was alive somewhere, somehow, I needed to find him. But the armed men now visible in the SUVs below seemed determined to make sure that didn't happen. "When the doors open," Leaf whispered as the plane touched down with a jolt, skidding slightly on the wet runway, "run toward the tree line. Don't stop no matter what you hear. Don't look back. I'll find you. The pendant will guide you if we get separated." Through the window, I saw men in black tactical gear, positioning themselves around the emergency exits and main cabin door, their movements precise and coordinated. No local police markings, no airport security identification, just the same unmarked tactical uniforms I'd glimpsed briefly in Seattle. My pendant pulsed brighter against my skin, almost in rhythm with my racing heart, as a strange, impossible thought formed in my mind. What if the northern lights weren't just something to see in Alaska? What if they were something to step through? And what might be waiting on the other side? The emergency exit door slammed behind us as gunshots peppered the fuselage of the plane we'd just escaped. Leaf pulled me down behind a luggage cart as airport workers scattered, their screams mixing with the sound of federal agents shouting commands. My pendant burned against my skin, its blue glow visible even through my sweatshirt, pulsing like a heartbeat in sync with the northern lights that had mysteriously appeared in the midday sky above the airport. "They're not supposed to be visible during daylight," Leaf muttered, eyes locked on the dancing green and blue waves overhead. "The doorway is becoming unstable. Your pendant is responding to the energy fluctuations. We need to reach the coordinates before they realize where we're headed." He grabbed my arm, pulling me toward a maintenance gate where a mud-splattered Jeep waited, keys dangling in the ignition like he'd planned this escape route long before our plane was forced to land. The pendant's heat became almost unbearable as we drove away from the airport. The agent's vehicles in pursuit, but falling behind as Leaf navigated logging roads and hidden pathways through the dense Alaskan forest with the confidence of someone who'd traveled this route countless times. Trees whipped past our windows, ancient giants standing sentinel over secrets buried deep in the wilderness, their shadows creating patterns that reminded me of the symbols in Dad's journal. "How did you know about the pendant?" I demanded, clinging to the dashboard as we bounced over a particularly rough section of terrain. "How did you know I'd be on that flight? Who are you working for?" The questions that had been building since Seattle finally burst forth, my patience exhausted by fear and confusion. Leaf kept his eyes on the primitive road ahead, hands steady on the wheel despite our dangerous speed. "Your father created the pendants, yours and his. They're not just jewelry, they're keys. Technological artifacts disguised as simple crystals. As for knowing you'd be on the flight." He glanced at me, expression unreadable. We've been tracking your movements since you opened that email with the classified file. But so have they. They? The government? Not exactly, Leaf replied, his voice dropping. Some work for the government, but others work for something else. Something your father discovered 20 years ago when Project Sapphire accidentally opened the first doorway. He swerved abruptly off the road onto an even smaller trail, barely visible among the underbrush. The aurora isn't just a light show, Jolie. It's a dimensional boundary. And sometimes, when conditions are right, things come through from the other side. The jeep burst through the tree line into a clearing where a small lake reflected the unnaturally bright aurora now dominating the sky despite the afternoon sun. At the lake's center stood a small island with what appeared to be ruins of a research station, its metal framework twisted and blackened as if by some ancient explosion. Leaf killed the engine, reaching for a backpack hidden under his seat. Your father's last known location, he said, nodding toward the island. 20 years ago, Project Sapphire set up a monitoring station to study unusual aurora activity centered over this exact spot. Within 6 months, they'd recorded over 30 anomalies equipment failures, time discrepancies, researchers reporting strange dreams and visions. Then they found the first artifact. He pulled something from his backpack that made my breath catch, a pendant identical to mine except for its deep green color. That's... Your father made 2. Yours blue, his green. Together, they form a complete key. Leaf's expression darkened. The night your father disappeared, there was an incident. Official reports called it an equipment malfunction that resulted in an explosion. 7 researchers died. 3, including your father, were classified as missing. The project was buried, the site abandoned, survivors sworn to secrecy. In the distance, the sound of approaching vehicles broke the momentary silence. Leaf grabbed my arm again, pulling me toward a small boat partially hidden in the reeds along the lakeshore. They're coming. We need to reach the station. It's the only safe place once the doorway fully opens. And my father? You said he's alive where? I resisted, unwilling to move further without answers. Leaf hesitated, his eyes flicking between me and the approaching sound of engines. On the other side. The boat ride to the island lasted only minutes, but each second stretched as the aurora pulsed overhead, growing brighter and more vivid. As we approached the ruins, I noticed details invisible from shore. The metal wasn't just twisted but warped in impossible ways, as if the laws of physics had temporarily stopped working. Some sections appeared to bend into dimensions that shouldn't exist, angles that hurt my eyes to look at directly. What happened here? I whispered, as Leaf secured the boat to a partially submerged dock. Your father happened, he replied. He figured out how to use the pendants to control the doorway. But something went wrong, something came through that shouldn't have. Leaf checked his watch. We have less than 30 minutes before full alignment. That's when the doorway will be most stable. The interior of the ruined station was surprisingly intact despite the external damage. Dusty equipment still stood in silent rows, monitors dark but undamaged. At the center of the main room, a circular platform about 10 feet in diameter took up most of the floor space, strange symbols etched around its perimeter. Directly above it, the ceiling had been torn away, offering an unobstructed view of the increasingly agitated aurora. Leaf moved with purpose, activating a generator that brought ancient systems humming back to life. Monitors flickered on, displaying readings I didn't understand but that clearly excited him. It's working, he muttered. The energy signatures are matching baseline parameters. The doorway is forming. You still haven't told me who you really are, I said, backing toward the exit as distrust overwhelmed my curiosity. How do you know all this? Were you part of Project Sapphire? Leaf paused, his back to me as he adjusted controls on a dust-covered panel. When he turned, his expression had changed, something alien in his eyes despite his human features. Not exactly. I was something they found, after your father opened the first doorway. My blood ran cold as the implications hit me. Not human. Something from the other side. I turned to run, only to find 2 men in tactical gear blocking the exit, their weapons trained on Leaf rather than me. Step away from the console, Carson, the taller agent ordered. You're in violation of containment protocols. His gaze shifted to me. Miss Anderson, you need to come with us for your own safety. You have no idea what he really is, or what he wants with that pendant. Leaf's laugh echoed unnaturally in the damaged structure. Tell her, Agent Blythe. Tell her what her father really discovered. Tell her why you've been hunting her since Seattle. The agent's expression hardened. Your father didn't just discover a doorway between dimensions, Ms. Anderson. He discovered that we're not alone in the universe, and that some of what's out there has been visiting Earth through the aurora for centuries. Some look exactly like us. Some can replace us. His gun never wavered from Leaf. Project Sci-fi was established to study these incursions, to understand the technology that makes them possible. The pendants are part of that technology. My head spun with competing truths, neither side seeming trustworthy. Above us, the aurora had formed a perfect spiral directly over the platform, its colors shifting from the typical greens and blues to deep purples and reds never seen in natural displays. My pendant burned against my skin, now glowing so brightly that its light shone through my clothing like a beacon. The doorway's opening, Leaf said calmly, seemingly unconcerned by the weapons aimed at him. Jolie needs to make a choice. Stay here with people who've lied to her for 20 years, or find her father on the other side. Your father is dead, Miss Anderson, Agent Blythe insisted. Whatever this thing is telling you is manipulation to get both pendants. The two pieces together can create a permanent doorway one that would allow mass incursion from their side. Leaf's eyes locked with mine, something ancient and unknowable behind his human gaze. Your father is alive, Jolie. He's waiting for you. But you must decide now. The platform began to glow with the same blue light as my pendant, symbols around its edge illuminating one by one. The air above it shimmered like heat waves in summer, reality itself seeming to thin and warp. Through the distortion, I glimpsed something impossible, a landscape of crystalline structures under an alien sky where multiple aurora bands danced in complex patterns. Last chance, Miss Anderson, Agent Blythe called, his voice barely audible over the building hum of energy. Step away from the platform. Instead, I removed my pendant from around my neck, its familiar weight suddenly significant in new ways. 20 years of questions. 20 years of being told I was paranoid, delusional, obsessed. 20 years of knowing in my heart that the official story of my father's disappearance was a lie. As federal agents poured into the station behind Blythe, I made my decision on that would forever change not just my understanding of the universe, but the future of two worlds now connected by a doorway of light that my father had discovered and that I was about to step through. I raised the pendant high, its blue glow merging with the green of Leaf's crystal, completing a circuit started 20 years ago by a scientist who saw beyond our reality into something larger and stranger than humanity had ever imagined. The doorway flared to blinding intensity as the pendants connected. The last thing I heard before stepping through was Agent Blythe shouting, "She's made her choice. Containment protocols now in effect." Consciousness returned slowly, my body feeling both weightless and impossibly heavy at once. The air tasted differentrica somehow, with hints of ozone and unfamiliar minerals that tingled against my tongue. Instead of the ruined research station, I lay on a smooth, crystalline surface that hummed with subtle energy. Above me stretched a sky unlike anything on Earth, deep violet instead of blue, streaked with multiple aurora bands that moved in geometric patterns too precise to be natural. "She's waking up," a voice said nearby, familiar yet different, like hearing a loved one speak through water. Vitals stabilizing. The transition was rougher than expected. My vision cleared gradually, revealing a face I recognized but couldn't immediately place a woman about my age, with features that reminded me of someone I'd known in another life. She wore a uniform unlike any I'd seen before, its fabric seeming to shift colors with her movements, adapting to the changing light around us. "Welcome to Nexus Point, Jolie Anderson," she said, helping me sit up slowly. "I'm Dr. Jays Williams. Your father asked me to meet you when you arrived." She smiled at my confusion. "I understand this is overwhelming. The first transition is always difficult reality shock, we call it. Your brain is trying to process sensory information that doesn't match any of its established patterns." "My father," I managed, my voice sounding strange in my ears. "Where is he?" Leaf said he was here. The memory of the research station, the agents, and Leaf's inhuman eyes came flooding back, sending a jolt of panic through me. "Leaf, where is he? What is this place?" Dr. Williams helped me stand, supporting my weight as my legs threatened to buckle. "Leaf is being processed. As for where you are, that's complicated. We call it the Nexusa dimension adjacent to Earth, where the barriers between realities are thinnest. Your father discovered it accidentally 20 years ago, and he's been leading our research efforts ever since. We stood in what appeared to be a medical facility, though the technology was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Through vast windows, I could see a landscape of crystalline structures that seemed to grow organically from the ground, some reaching hundreds of feet into the violet sky. In the distance, what looked like a city shimmered with internal light, its architecture following impossible curves and angles. "This can't be real," I whispered, my scientist's mind rebelling against what my eyes were reporting. "This has to be some kind of hallucination induced by whatever energy was in that platform." Dr. Williams laughed softly. "Your father said exactly the same thing when he first arrived. He spent 3 months trying to prove this was all a shared delusion or elaborate government experiment. Eventually, the evidence convinced him otherwise." She guided me toward a doorway that opened automatically as we approached. "He's waiting for you in the primary research hub. He would have met you himself, but transitions are unpredictable. We couldn't be certain exactly when you'd arrive or in what condition." The corridors we walked through teemed with activity-some people in uniforms like Dr. Williams, others in civilian clothing that suggested Earth origin, and still others who moved with the same strange quality I'd noticed in Leaf Human in appearance, but somehow fundamentally different. None paid us particular attention, focused on their own tasks with the single-minded dedication of researchers everywhere. "How many people are here?" I asked, trying to make sense of the community that apparently existed in this impossible place. "From Earth? About 300 at last count. Most are scientists who came willingly once contact was established. A few, like your father, arrived accidentally during the early days." Dr. Williams glanced at me. The others, the natives, number in the thousands in this settlement alone. Their civilization spans much of this dimension. My mind reeled with implications. And they just accepted humans appearing in their world? No conflict, no fear? Dr. Williams's expression darkened slightly. "The situation is more complicated than that. The Nexus was dying when your father arrived, their son entering a phase that was making their world increasingly uninhabitable. Our arrival presented an opportunity for them, a potential salvation. But not all agree on how that salvation should be achieved." Before I could ask what she meant, we reached a massive circular chamber, where dozens of workstations surrounded a central holographic display, showing what appeared to be a map of overlapping dimensions. At one of the stations stood a man with his back to us, silver-streaked hair falling to his shoulders as he gestured at calculations floating in the air before him. "Ferris," Dr. Williams called. "She's here." The man froze, his hands stopping mid-gesture. Slowly, he turned, and 20 years of searching condensed into a single moment of recognition. My father, older, but unmistakably alive, stared at me with a mixture of joy and terror that made no sense until he spoke. "Jolie," he whispered, crossing the room with urgent steps. "You're really here. Which means..." He grabbed my shoulders, eyes wild with something beyond simple concern. "The pendant. Did you bring it through? Did they let you keep it?" The pendant. In the chaos of transition, I'd forgotten about it. My hand went to my neck where it had hung for 20 years, finding nothing. 2 had it at the station. When the doorway opened, my father's expression collapsed into despair. "Then it's begun. They have both pieces now." He turned to Dr. Williams. "Alert the council. Invasion protocols are now in effect." Back to me. "I never wanted you involved in this, Jolie. I tried to keep you safe by staying away." "Safe from what?" I demanded, frustration finally overwhelming confusion. "What is happening? Who are they? What invasion?" Instead of answering, my father led me to the central display, manipulating controls until the holographic image zoomed out to show Earth and the Nexus as parallel planes with multiple points of connection aurora doorways spanning the globe. 20 years ago, I accidentally discovered that the aurora borealis sometimes thins the barriers between dimensions. Project Sci-fi was studying these anomalies when we made contact with the Nexus civilization. The display changed to show historical images, first contact scenarios, early communication attempts, the gradual establishment of research outposts on both sides. What we didn't initially understand was that the Nexus is dying. Their sun is failing. Within a century, their entire dimension will be uninhabitable. So they need somewhere to go, I said, understanding dawning. Earth. My father nodded grimly. Some want peaceful integration, a gradual resettlement of their population among humans. Others want to take over, Dr. Williams finished. Replace humans with their own kind. They've already begun with strategic placements, people of influence, government officials, military leaders. Leaf, I whispered, remembering his inhuman eyes. Leaf was one of the peaceful faction, actually, my father said, surprising me. A liaison assigned to find you and bring you safely to the Nexus so I could explain everything before the invasion began. But now that both pendants are in militant faction hands, the choice for peaceful integration is gone. The pendants together can create a stable, permanent doorway large enough for mass transit between dimensions. The implications hit me like a physical blow. How long do we have? Hours, maybe less, Dr. Williams answered, monitoring communications on her wrist device. They're already mobilizing on both sides. My father's eyes met mine, decades of separation dissolving in our shared understanding of what needed to be done. I've developed a countermeasure, a way to collapse all doorways permanently, sealing our dimensions from each other forever, but it requires direct access to the primary doorway control system. On Earth, I guessed. At the Alaska station you just left, he confirmed. We need to go back, Jolie, together. One last journey through a doorway I should have sealed 20 years ago. Dr. Williams looked up sharply from her device. Ferris, the Council is requesting your presence. They're voting on evacuation protocols for our Earth allies before the barriers are sealed. My father hesitated, torn between immediate duty and the larger mission. Tell them I'll be there shortly. To me, there's something else you need to see before we go back. He led me to a smaller adjoining chamber where a single stasis pod hummed with energy, its occupant visible through a translucent shield. Inside lay Leafor, someone identical to him connected to monitoring equipment that displayed neural patterns unlike anything human. This is the real Leaf, the one who was supposed to meet you. My confusion must have shown on my face, because my father continued urgently. The being who brought you to Alaska was an impostor, a militant faction operative who assumed Leaf's identity after we sent him to find you. Their ability to mimic humans is virtually perfect, but they couldn't replicate the bond Leaf had formed with the pendant during our test runs. Your pendant would have reacted differently to the real Leaf. Then the agents at the station, they were trying to protect me? Some of them, yes. There are humans on both sides of this conflict, Jolie. Some believe coexistence is impossible and any contact is a threat. Others work with the peaceful Nexus faction to find a solution that doesn't involve invasion or extinction for either species. Dr. Williams interrupted, her expression grave. We're picking up massive energy fluctuations at all known doorway points on Earth. They're beginning the synchronization process. My father's face hardened with resolve. Then we have less time than I thought. The emergency transit hub is our only option now. He gripped my shoulders again, eyes boring into mine. Jolie, I need to know you're with me. What happens in the next few hours will determine the fate of two worlds. Once we return to Earth, we'll be hunted by both human extremists and Nexus militants. The only people we can trust are those who understand what's really at stake. Around us, alarms began to sound as the facility shifted into emergency protocols. Through the windows, I could see the aurora bands in the violet sky forming complex new patterns, pulsing with increasing intensity as if responding to some distant signal. The doorways were activating across dimensions, preparing for what would be either salvation or invasion depending on which side you stood. 20 years of searching for answers had led to this moment of terrible clarity. My father was alive but caught in an interdimensional conflict beyond anything I could have imagined. The conspiracy I'd dedicated my life to uncovering was both smaller than I'd feared and vastly larger than I'd ever dreamed possible. As people rushed around us, preparing for crisis, I made my second life-altering decision of the day. I'm with you, I told my father, the weight of two worlds settling onto our shoulders. Tell me what we need to do. Emergency transit is not designed for human physiology. Dr. Williams warned as technicians prepared the specialized doorway chamber deep beneath the main Nexus research facility. Her fingers flew across control panels, making adjustments while my father packed a small bag with equipment I didn't recognize. The regular transition points establish a gradual phase shift that allows biological systems to adapt. This is less elegant. My father checked a device that resembled a wristwatch, but displayed symbols instead of numbers. We don't have a choice, Jais. The synchronized doorway network will be operational within 3 hours. Once that happens, the militant faction can move their entire force to Earth simultaneously. The transit chamber looked nothing like the platform I'd arrived on. Instead, twin cylindrical pods stood in the center of a circular room, connected to massive power conduits that pulsed with energy. The walls were covered with the same strange symbols I'd seen at the Alaska station, but here they glowed with internal light, shifting and changing as technicians made adjustments to the system. "What exactly will this do to us?" I asked, watching a simulation on a nearby screen that showed 2 humanoid figures dissolving into particles before reforming. The clinical imagery didn't inspire confidence. Dr. Williams hesitated before answering. "Emergency transit temporarily converts matter to energy for instantaneous transfer. The process is imperfect. There will be pain, disorientation, possibly temporary memory fragmentation." She glanced at my father, something unspoken passing between them. "But you'll survive. Probably." "Great. Probably." "There's something you're not telling me," I said, recognizing the look scientists get when they're hiding unpleasant details. "What's the real risk here?" My father paused his preparations. "The process was designed for Nexus physiology, not human. We've made adjustments based on my previous crossings, but, I prompted when he trailed off. "But the last 3 human test subjects experienced significant neural damage." Dr. Williams finished. Their memories became scrambled past, present, and even possible futures all mixed together. They couldn't distinguish what had happened from what might happen. "Time, perception, distortion," my father added clinically, though his eyes revealed deeper concern. "The human brain processes temporal reality differently than Nexus natives. Emergency transit disrupts that processing." A cold weight settled in my stomach. "And what happened to these test subjects?" Dr. Williams looked away. "One recovered, eventually. The others, their minds created new realities to reconcile the contradictions. Paranoid delusions, mostly." I laughed bitterly. "So if we survive, I might end up actually crazy after spending my life being called crazy for believing the truth." "Perfect." My father gripped my shoulders, his eyes intense. "There's a stabilizing factor they didn't have. Family connection, shared DNA, shared memories. I'll anchor you, and you'll anchor me. Our mental patterns are similar enough that we should be able to maintain coherence through the transition." "Should. Probably." The vocabulary of scientists who weren't actually sure what would happen. An alarm blared overhead, interrupting further discussion. A technician at the main console shouted something in a language I didn't understand, but the urgency translated perfectly. "They've detected our preparations," Dr. Williams translated, her expression grim. "Militant forces are converging on this facility." "How long do we have?" my father demanded. "Minutes. Maybe less." He turned to me, decision made. "Now or never, Jolie. If we wait, they'll stop us, and Earth will face an invasion it can't possibly understand or repel." Around us, the facility shifted into lockdown mode. Heavy barriers descended over the main entrance while Nexus security forces took up defensive positions. Through a monitoring screen, I could see figures approaching some human in appearance, others with features that flickered and shifted as if their forms weren't entirely stable in this reality. "What about everyone here?" I asked, watching the preparations for battle. "What happens to them if we seal the doorways permanently?" "They chose to be here," my father replied. But the shadow that crossed his face told me the decision wasn't as simple as he made it sound. "The Council has been preparing for this possibility since we discovered the militant faction's plans. There are contingency scenarios." Dr. Williams interrupted, her voice tight with controlled urgency. "Ferris, the pods are ready. You need to go now." She pressed a small device into my hand, something like a thumb drive but constructed of crystal and metal. "This contains the shutdown sequence for the primary doorway. It has to be inserted directly into the control console at the Alaska station." The sounds of conflict grew louder outside the transit chamber. Energy weapons discharged, their distinctive whine punctuated by more conventional gunfire. The Nexus security forces were engaging the approaching militants, buying us precious minutes. "What about you?" I asked Dr. Williams as technicians ushered us toward the waiting pods. "Are you coming with us?" She shook her head, a sad smile touching her lips. "My place is here." Someone needs to make sure this doorway closes permanently once you're through. She glanced at my father. We always knew it might end this way, Ferris. My father embraced her briefly, decades of shared history evident in the gesture. Find Kalen and the others. Implement Protocol Ember. He handed her his research tablet. All my work is there, the atmospheric stabilization formulas, everything. It could buy your world another century at least. Understanding dawned. My father hadn't just been researching doorways all these years, she'd been trying to save the Nexus itself from its dying sun. We're out of time, a technician announced as the facility shuddered under some external impact. Barrier integrity warnings flashed on multiple screens. The emergency transit pods opened, their interiors glowing with the same blue-green energy as the Aurora doorways. My father stepped into one, gesturing for me to take the other. Focus on something fixed, he instructed as technicians attached monitoring sensors to our temples. A memory, a fact, something you know is absolutely true. It will help maintain neural coherence during transition. As the pod closed around me, I caught a last glimpse of Dr. Williams at the control console, her expression resolute as she initiated the sequence that would send us across dimensions through a method considered too dangerous for regular use. Beyond her, the main doors to the chamber began to spark and glow, someone cutting through from the outside. Ready for emergency transit, she announced over the intercom. Coordinates locked to Alaska Research Station. Transition in 3, 2. The militant forces breached the outer door in a shower of metal and energy, pouring into the antechamber as security forces engaged them in desperate close-quarters combat. Through the chaos, I saw a familiar face, the false Leaf, who had brought me to Alaska, his features now distorted with rage as he recognized what we were attempting. "Stop them!" he shouted, his voice inhuman in its intensity. "They have the shutdown code." Dr. Williams slammed her hand down on the final activation control. 1. The world dissolved into particles of light and unimaginable pain. My body felt simultaneously compressed to a singular point and expanded across infinite space. Time lost all meaning as past, present, and possible futures blurred together in a kaleidoscope of sensory input too intense for my brain to process. I saw my childhood, my father teaching me about the stars. I saw the moment he disappeared. I saw possible futures branching before Mesum where Earth survived, others where the invasion succeeded, humanity slowly replaced by beings who looked human but weren't. Through it all, one thought anchored me to reality. My father is alive. This is real. Everything I believed was true. When reality reassembled itself, I was on my knees on the circular platform in the Alaska Research Station, alarms blaring around me. The half-destroyed building looked different, equipment upgraded, the damage partially repaired. Armed personnel rushed toward us, weapons raised but expressions confused. My father materialized beside me a moment later, collapsing immediately. Blood trickled from his nose and ears, a bad reaction to the emergency transit. As my vision stabilized, I realized we hadn't arrived alone. The platform continued to pulse with energy, the emergency doorway remaining open behind us. Something was coming through. Multiple somethings. "Shut it down," my father gasped to the shocked personnel. "Override code. Sierra, Sapphire, 7. The security team hesitated, clearly not recognizing the haggard man giving orders. Their weapons remained trained on us as the doorway pulsed brighter, the air shimmering with imminent arrivals. I fumbled for the crystal drive Dr. Williams had given me, holding it up with shaking hands. "We need to reach the control console. Now," a familiar voice responded from the doorway. "I'm afraid that won't be possible, Miss Anderson." Agent Blythe entered, flanked by more security personnel. But something about his movement, his eyes, felt wrong. The way the false Leaf had felt wrong. "You're one of them," I realized aloud. "You've been one of them all along." Blythe smiled, the expression not quite reaching his eyes. "Not all along, just for the past 6 months. The real Agent Blythe was unfortunately resistant to our cause." He nodded toward the platform where the first of the militant Nexus forces was beginning to materialize. "You're too late. The synchronized doorway network is activating worldwide. The transition has begun." Behind me, my father whispered a single word: "Run." I grabbed his arm, hauling him to his feet as the room erupted into chaos. Security forces, suddenly uncertain who to trust, who was human and who wasn't, as more Nexus beings emerged from the pulsing doorway. Some security personnel turned their weapons on their own colleagues, revealing their true allegiances. "The North Corridor," my father gasped as we fled. "Secondary control station. We can still shut down the primary doorway from there." As we raced through the partially rebuilt facility, pursued by both human and non-human forces, the full scale of the conspiracy finally became clear. The deception hadn't just begun with my father's disappearance 20 years ago. The infiltration had been happening for decades, possibly centuries. Beings from a dying world gradually positioning themselves for the moment when technology would allow full-scale migration. And now that moment had arrived, with Earth completely unprepared for the truth hidden behind the Aurora's dancing lights. What the hell just happened? The security officer's voice shook as she helped barricade the secondary control room door. Lieutenant Joyce Fearman, according to her name badge, had been the only one to follow us when we fled the main chamber. Now she checked her weapon with trembling hands, clearly struggling to process what she'd witnessed. Those people, they changed. Their faces rippled like water. My father slumped into a chair at the auxiliary control console, blood still trickling from his nose as after effects of the emergency transit racked his body. Outside, alarms continued to blare as gunfire and strange energy discharges echoed through the facility. "They're not people," I explained, inserting Dr. Quote, Williams' crystal drive into the console port. "They're from somewhere else, another dimension accessed through the Aurora. They've been infiltrating Earth for years, replacing key figures. And you're..." Lieutenant Fearman kept her distance, weapon not exactly pointed at us, but not lowered either. "Human," my father assured her, fingers flying across the ancient keyboard despite his weakened state. "Both of us. I'm Dr. Ferris Anderson. I founded Project Sapphire before complications arose." Recognition dawned on Fearman's face. "Anderson? But you're listed as deceased. 20 years ago. Reports of my death were greatly exaggerated," he muttered, focusing on the screen where incomprehensible data streams flowed. "Jolie, I need the activation sequence from the drive." I leaned over his shoulder, scanning the information now displayed. My background in data analytics suddenly proved useful as patterns emerged from the chaos. "There, that repeating sequence. It looks like a key cipher." My father nodded, impressed. "You always were quick." His fingers entered commands with practiced precision despite the decades since he'd last touched this system. "The drive contains shutdown codes for all known doorway points, but we need access to the primary network, which means..." A thunderous boom shook the room as something heavy impacted the barricaded door. Metal groaned under pressure, never meant to contain it. "They're coming through," Fearman warned, taking up position with her sidearm trained on the buckling door. "Whatever you're doing, do it faster." The small control room's monitors suddenly flared to life, showing feeds from around-the-world research stations in Antarctica, Siberia, Greenland, Australia, all places where aurora phenomena occurred regularly. At each location, the same scene was unfolding, circular platforms glowing with unearthly light as figures emerged from shimmering air. "The synchronized network is fully operational," my father said grimly. "Doorways are opening at all confirmed aurora contact points." Fearman stared at the screens in horror. "How many are there?" 27 major transition points, countless minor ones. Another impact shook the door, this one leaving a visible dent in the reinforced metal. Whatever was trying to enter wasn't relying on human strength. "I thought you said they looked human," Fearman said, backing away from the increasingly damaged entrance. "Some do, others." My father hesitated, clearly struggling with how to explain. "The ones who maintained human form longest can pass for us indefinitely. Others need periodic reconstitution in their native energy state. What's coming through that door is probably one of the latter." The crystal drive hummed as it integrated with the system, revealing more of its stored data. Complex equations filled the screen, biological markers alongside quantum formulas, too advanced for even cutting-edge Earth science. "This isn't just a shutdown sequence," I realized, scanning the information. "This is a targeting system of some kind." My father nodded grimly. "The Nexus militants aren't just coming through, Jolie. They're bringing something with thema biological agent, designed to accelerate atmospheric adaptation." "Translation for the soldier in the room," Fearman demanded, never taking her eyes off the increasingly compromised door. "They're terraforming Earth," I explained, the horrifying truth becoming clear. Changing our atmosphere to match their dying world, which would make Earth uninhabitable for humans, my father finished. The process would take years, but once begun, it's irreversible. A new alert flashed on the screen, incoming transmission from a location I recognized immediately. The coordinates from my father's journal, the lake with the abandoned research station where I'd first crossed dimensions. "It's Dr. Williams," my father said, accepting the transmission. The screen filled with her face, strained but determined. Behind her, the Nexus transit facility was in ruins, evidence of fierce fighting everywhere. "Ferris, we're compromised," she reported, her voice breaking with static. "The militants seized control of the emergency transit system. They're sending forces through to all Earth locations. But we've managed to create a countermeasure." She held up a small device, similar to the crystal drive. "This will collapse all doorways permanently by inverting the quantum signature that allows cross-dimensional travel. But it needs to be deployed from both sides simultaneously." "That means someone has to stay in the Nexus," my father realized, his face paling. Dr. Williams nodded sadly. "I volunteered, but you need to initiate from your side within the next 10 minutes, or the window closes." The door to our control room buckled again, a clawed appendage breaking through the metal, something decidedly not human reaching through with terrifying strength. "Can you do it?" Dr. Williams asked urgently. "Are you at a primary node?" My father checked the system readouts. "Secondary only. We need main control, which is currently overrun with militants." Fearman stepped forward, her military training asserting itself through the fear. "Give me the drive. I'll get to main control." "It won't work," my father said. "The system requires genetic authentication specifically, my DNA or Jolie's. The shutdown protocol was designed that way as a safeguard." On screen, Dr. Williams looked over her shoulder at some unseen threat. "Ferris, we're out of time. The peaceful faction is collapsed. If we don't seal these doorways now, both worlds are lost." Another crash against our door, the clawed appendage working to widen the breach. Fearman fired several rounds through the opening, resulting in an inhuman shriek of pain and rage. "There's another way," I said suddenly, spotting something on the facility schematic displayed on a secondary monitor. The primary aurora focused the original doorway point. "It's directly above us, on the roof." My father followed my gaze to the schematic. "The focal point where Project Sapphire first detected cross-dimensional energies. Yes, it's a natural convergence, stronger than any artificial doorway. If we can reach it," I continued, the plan forming as I spoke. "Could we use the drive to collapse the entire network from there?" Dr. Williams nodded on screen. "The natural focal point would amplify the effect. But Ferris, it would require direct exposure to cross-dimensional energy. No shielding. The human body isn't designed to withstand that." The unspoken truth hung in the air. Whoever deployed the shutdown sequence at the focal point wouldn't survive the process. My father's expression hardened with resolve. "I'll do it. This began with me 20 years ago. It should end with me." "No," I protested. "There has to be another way." The door to the control room gave way with a final screech of tearing metal. The creature that pushed through bore only the vaguest resemblance to human form, limbs elongated and bent at impossible angles, face a shifting mass of features that couldn't settle on a single configuration. Fearman emptied her magazine into it, the bullets passing through with minimal effect. The creature advanced, its body rippling and reforming around the wounds. "Go," Fearman shouted, drawing a combat knife as her last defense. "I'll hold it as long as I can." My father grabbed the crystal drive and my arm, pulling me toward a maintenance ladder that led to the roof access. Behind us, Fearman engaged the creature in desperate close-quarters combat, her training giving her seconds at best against something that violated the laws of human biology. "She's sacrificing herself," I gasped as we climbed the narrow ladder shaft. "Many have," my father replied grimly. "On both sides of this conflict. The militants don't represent all Nexus beings, Jolie. Many just wanted to survive to find a peaceful solution." The roof access hatch opened to a scene of otherworldly beauty and terror. The night sky above the facility blazed with the most intense aurora display I'd ever witnessed. Not just bands of light, but complex, geometric patterns that pulsed in synchronized rhythm. Directly above the center of the facility, The lights converged into a perfect spiral of energy that reached down toward a raised platform, the primary focal point where Project Sapphire had first discovered the thinning between dimensions. "The broadcast must go out to all doorways simultaneously," my father explained as we approached the platform. The crystal drive pulsed in his hand, resonating with the energy above. "Dr. Williams will trigger the collapse from the Nexus side while we initiate from here." The roof door burst open behind us as more creatures emerged, some in human form, others in transitional states between human and their native appearance. Leading them was the false leaf, his features now flickering between the park ranger I'd met on the plane and something inhuman beneath. "Don't do this, Anderson," he called, his voice overlapping with strange harmonics. "Your world doesn't have to die. We can coexist." "By terraforming Earth to match your dying world?" my father challenged. "By replacing humans with your kind? That's not coexistence. It's evolution," False Leaf insisted. "The natural order. The strong survive. Humanity deserves a chance to determine its own future," my father replied, stepping onto the platform directly beneath the spiraling aurora. The energy immediately responded, reaching down to envelop him in tendrils of light. His skin began to glow with the same blue-green energy, the dangerous direct exposure Dr. Williams had warned about. False Leaf and his militants advanced, but stopped short of the platform, clearly unable or unwilling to enter the intense energy field now surrounding my father. "Jolie, the transmission," my father gasped, his body trembling as the aurora energy coursed through him. "Activate the sequence, now." I took the crystal drive from his outstretched hand, hesitating as I understood what completing this action would mean. My father would die. Dr. Williams would die. Countless others on both sides of the dimensional barrier would be forever separated from whichever world they happened to be in when the doorways collapsed. "There's no other way," my father said gently, reading my thoughts as he always had. "Some doorways aren't meant to remain open." With tears blurring my vision, I connected the drive to the platform's control panel and entered the activation sequence. Immediately, the aurora overhead intensified, the spiral tightening as energy built towards some critical threshold. On the small screen of the crystal drive, Dr. Williams appeared one last time. "Sequence received. Initiating collapse from Nexus side. It's been an honor, Ferris. And Jolie, your father, saved us all in more ways than you know." The false leaf screamed in rage and desperation as his body began to dissolve, the collapse sequence affecting any Nexus matter caught on the wrong side of the dimensional barrier. Around us, the militant forces suffered the same fate, their human disguises failing completely to reveal the alien forms beneath before those too dissolved into particles of light that were drawn upward into the aurora. "Dad," I whispered, reaching toward my father as the energy field around him intensified. "I just found you again." His smile was peaceful despite the obvious pain racking his body. "You never lost me, Jolie. I've watched over you every day for 20 years. Through the doorways, through the aurora. I've always been there." Above us, the spiral aurora contracted to a single point of blinding light, then expanded outward in a silent shockwave that rolled across the sky in all directions. Where the magnificent light display had been, only normal stars remained, the dimensional barrier sealed, potentially forever. On the platform, my father collapsed. I rushed to him, cradling his glowing form as tears streamed down my face. "Stay with me," I begged. "We did it. We saved everyone." His hand, translucent now and barely substantial, touched my cheek. "The pendants," he whispered. "Find them. They're more than keys, Jolie. They're records. Everything I learned about both worlds. About sustainable energy. About peaceful coexistence. The future." His body grew more transparent by the second, the aurora energy claiming him as payment for closing the doorways. "I don't understand," I wept. "Why did it have to be like this? Why all the secrets?" My father's voice faded as his form dissipated into particles of light. "Because humanity wasn't ready. But it will be. Someday. And when that day comes..." The rest of his words were lost as the energy field collapsed, leaving me alone on the platform beneath a sky now empty of alien light. In the distance, sirens approached, human authorities finally responding to the crisis, too late to witness either the invasion or its prevention. But above me, just for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of blue-green light among the stars, not an aurora, but something else. a reminder that some connections transcend even the barriers between worlds. And somewhere in the vast complex beneath me lay two crystal pendants, me father's final gift and final mission. A mission I was only just beginning to understand. 6 months after the night the aurora disappeared from Earth's skies, I sat in a sterile government conference room, finishing my testimony to yet another panel of officials with security clearances I couldn't pronounce. The table between us was littered with satellite images, atmospheric readings, and classified reports about the unexplained aurora cessation event that had scientists worldwide baffled. Outside the window, Washington, D.C. shimmered in summer heat, oblivious to how close humanity had come to extinction. "So to summarize, Miss Anderson," said Director Anson Bingley, a stern man with calculating eyes who'd replaced the false Agent Blythe, "you maintain that your father sacrificed himself to seal a dimensional portal, preventing an invasion from beings from another reality." His tone made clear what he thought of my story despite the mountain of evidence supporting it. "That's correct," I replied, my patience worn thin after 3 straight days of questioning. "The same beings who had infiltrated your agency, along with every other organization studying the aurora phenomena. The same beings who killed the real Agent Blythe and assumed his identity." I pushed forward the DNA comparison, showing subtle but significant differences between samples from Blythe before and after his replacement. "You can keep pretending this is all some elaborate delusion if it helps you sleep at night, Director, but the fact remains. The aurora is gone, worldwide, simultaneously, with no scientific explanation." Lieutenant Joyce Fearman, now my reluctant ally after surviving the Alaska facility incident, shifted uncomfortably beside me. The deep scar across her facie, a parting gift from the creature she'd fought to buy us time, had earned her both respect and suspicion from her superiors. "Sir, I can confirm Ms. Anderson's account. I witnessed the non-human entities firsthand. They violated known biological principles." Bingley sighed, removing his glasses to rub tired eyes. "Lieutenant, your service record is impeccable, which is the only reason you're not in psychiatric evaluation. But surely you understand our position. Interdimensional beings using the northern lights as doorways. A dying parallel world, it sounds like." "Science fiction," I finished for him. "Yes, you've said that approximately 16 times since yesterday morning. Yet here we are, with unexplainable atmospheric readings, tissue samples that defy classification, and a global phenomenon that vanished overnight after centuries of documentation." I leaned forward, my frustration boiling over. "What's your explanation, Director? Solar minimum? Mass hallucination? Aliens decided our planet wasn't interesting enough?" Before Bingley could respond, his assistant hurried in, whispering urgently in his ear. His expression shifted from irritation to alarm in seconds. "We'll continue this debriefing later," he announced, gathering his papers with uncharacteristic haste. "You're both confined to the facility until further notice." "What's happening?" Fearman demanded, her military bearing reasserting itself. Bingley hesitated, then apparently decided we deserved at least some truth. "We've detected anomalous energy readings, similar to aurora signatures, but localized, concentrated, at 27 points globally." My blood ran cold. "The doorway points, they're trying to reopen them." "That's impossible," Fearman objected. "We saw the portals collapse. Your father sealed them from the outside," I realized, the implications hitting me. "But what if someone's trying to open them from our side?" Bingley's assistant interrupted again, this time loud enough for us to hear. "Sir, the Alaska site is showing the strongest readings, and there's been a security breach." The pendants. It had to be. In the chaos following that night, the government had recovered both crystals from the facility. I'd spent months trying to convince them to let me study them, to decipher what my father meant by his final words about them containing records, knowledge that could help humanity. "I need to get to Alaska," I said, standing so abruptly my chair toppled backward. "Now, whatever's happening, I'm the only one who understands the technology." "Absolutely not," Bingley responded automatically. "This is a military situation requiring—" "A military response nearly got us all killed last time," Fearman interrupted, surprising me with her support. "Sir, she's right. Anderson knows more about these phenomena than our entire research division." If someone's trying to re-establish contact with the other dimension, we need her expertise. The standoff lasted several tense seconds before Bingley's phone chimed with an urgent message. Whatever it contained drained the remaining colour from his face. Fine, he conceded. But you're under military escort the entire time. Lieutenant Fearman, consider this your new assignment. Keep her alive and prevent any unauthorized actions. He fixed me with a stern glare. To be perfectly clear, Miss Anderson, you are a consultant only. You touch nothing without express permission. 6 hours later, our military transport was descending toward the rebuilt Alaska facility. Through the window, I could see the changes made since that fateful night. New security perimeters, weapon emplacements, a small city of research buildings surrounding the original structure. The government might doubt my story, but they were certainly taking the anomalies seriously. They've been studying the pendants non-stop, Fearman explained as we strapped in for landing. Your father's green one, and your blue one. The scientists claim they're unlike any material on Earth crystalline structures that somehow store and transmit energy in ways that violate conventional physics. The landing gear touched down with a jolt that matched the anxiety in my stomach. And now something's happening with them. Activating according to the reports. The energy signatures started building 3 days ago, growing stronger each hour. They've evacuated non-essential personnel as a precaution. As we disembarked into the bitter Alaskan cold, I noted the aurora was still absent from the sky, the first winter in recorded history where the northern lights had failed to appear. Yet something felt different in the air, a subtle vibration that raised goosebumps along my arms beneath my heavy coat. Dr. Sandy Discora, lead scientist for what they were now calling Project Doorway, met us at the entrance. Her expression was simultaneously excited and terrified, the look of someone witnessing the impossible and loving every second of it. They're communicating, she blurted without preamble, leading us through security checkpoints at a pace that had Fearman and our military escort jogging to keep up. The pendants, with each other, and possibly elsewhere. Communicating how? I asked, noting the increased security presence, heavily armed soldiers at every junction, weapons at ready positions. Quantum entanglement, we think, but that doesn't explain the localized aurora-like energy field that's formed in the containment chamber. She swiped her keycard through the final checkpoint. See for yourself. The containment chamber had once been the main research area of the original facility. Now it was a fortress of monitoring equipment surrounding a central isolation chamber, where both pendants floated mysteriously, suspended in mid-air about 3 feet apart. Between them, a small point of swirling blue-green light had formed miniature aurora behavior, but impossibly contained without any visible technology supporting it. It started as microscopic energy exchanges between the crystals. Dr. Discora explained, her voice filled with scientific wonder. Then 2 days ago, this formed. It's growing gradually, hour by hour. It's a doorway, I whispered, moving closer to the observation glass. A small one, like a test signal. The pendants pulsed in unison as I approached, the swirling energy brightening noticeably. Several researchers looked up from their instruments in alarm. They're responding to you, Fearman observed, her hand moving instinctively toward her sidearm. Dr. Discora nodded excitedly. We theorized there might be a biological component. The pendants were attuned to specific users. Your father's DNA and yours. We've tried introducing your genetic material to the chamber, but this is the strongest reaction we've seen. The miniature aurora suddenly expanded, doubling in size as patterns formed within it, not random lights but deliberate shapes, symbols. It's a message, I breathed, recognizing similarities to the writing I'd seen throughout the Nexus facility. They're trying to communicate. Who is? Bingley demanded, having followed us from Washington on a faster transport. You said the doorways were permanently sealed. I shook my head, watching the symbols change and shift. I thought they were, but what if? What if my father found another way? Hope, dangerous and wild, bloomed in my chest. What if he survived somehow? The symbols stabilized, forming distinct characters that hovered in the energy field. Dr. Discora frantically documented them, while other researchers adjusted instruments to better record the phenomenon. Can you read it? Fearman asked quietly. No, I admitted, but I think I know someone who might be able to. Someone who was there the night everything happened. I turned to Bingley. knowing my request would meet resistance. "I need to speak with Lieutenant Joyce Jaseman." Bingley's expression darkened, the officer who suffered neurological damage during the incident. "She's been in psychiatric care since that night. Her mind was broken by whatever she experienced." "She wasn't broken," I countered. "She was connected. She was closest to the energy field when the collapse happened. What if she absorbed something? Knowledge, language, memories from the other side?" Before Bingley could refuse, alarms blared throughout the facility. The miniature aurora had suddenly expanded again, now nearly 2 feet in diameter. Within its swirling depths, something impossible appeared, the ghostly outline of a human hand, pressing outward as if against invisible glass. "Containment breach imminent," an automated voice announced as researchers scrambled away from the chamber. "All personnel evacuate immediately." "Seal the room," Bingley ordered as security teams rushed into position. "Nothing gets out." But I stood transfixed, recognizing something about that hand, the shape, a small scar across the knuckles. I'd seen it write formulas in journals throughout my childhood, felt it brush hair from my face during thunderstorms. "It's him," I whispered as Fearman tried to pull me toward the exit. "It's my father." The facility plunged into darkness as the miniature doorway pulsed with increasing brightness. When emergency lighting activated seconds later, the floating hand had been replaced by a face as spectral and translucent, but unmistakable. My father, speaking words I couldn't hear through the containment field, his expression urgent. Not dead, but trapped somewhere between dimensions. Behind him, I glimpsed strange crystalline structures that could only be the Nexus. "We need to help him," I said, pulling away from Fearman. "He's trying to come through." Bingley stepped between me and the containment chamber. "That's not happening. Whatever that thing is, it stays contained until we understand exactly what we're dealing with." The pendants pulsed again, the energy field between them expanding once more. My father's image grew clearer, more solid, his mouth forming words with increasing desperation. One phrase I could finally read from his lips. "They're coming." "Who's coming?" Fearman asked, voicing the question before I could. The answer came not from my father's apparition, but from behind us, as the facility's main doors exploded inward. Through the smoke and debris stepped a figure I recognized immediately. Agent Blythe, the one supposedly replaced by a Nexus militant. The one supposedly dead. "We are," he announced as more figures entered behind him, scientists, military personnel, civilians I didn't recognize, all moving with the same unnatural precision. "And this time, we're already here." The attack happened with mechanical precision. False Blythe's forces moved through the facility like a single organism with dozens of bodies, neutralizing security personnel with terrifying efficiency. These weren't the same militants we'd faced 6 months ago. They were more coordinated, more human in their movements, yet somehow more alien in their perfect synchronization. "Impossible," Director Bingley whispered beside me, watching his own security teams fall before the infiltrators. "We screened everyone. DNA tests, psychological evaluations, continuous monitoring. They've evolved." I realized, noticing subtle differences in how these attackers moved compared to the shapeshifters from the Nexus. They're not just mimicking humans anymore. They've become something new. Lieutenant Fearman pulled us behind an overturned research console as weapons fire erupted across the lab. "Less theorizing, more surviving," she hissed, checking her sidearm. "We need an exit strategy." Through the chaos, I kept my eyes fixed on the containment chamber where my father's spectral image grew increasingly solid as the miniature aurora expanded. He was shouting now, gesturing frantically at the pendants floating before him. Beyond him, I could see other figures moving in the crystalline landscape of the Nexus Doctor. Williams among them, also trying to communicate something urgent. "They knew this would happen," I said, the pieces falling into place. The pendants weren't just records. They were beacons. Warning systems. "Warning about what?" Bingley demanded, his authority useless in the face of the overwhelming assault. Before I could answer, False Blythe approached the containment chamber, ignoring the weapons fire around him with inhuman calm. "The convergence," he announced, his voice carrying unnaturally through the din of battle. "The inevitable merging of dimensions that your father tried to prevent." He placed his hand against the chamber glass, directly opposite my father's spectral palm. "You destroyed our doorways, but you couldn't stop evolution. Some of us were caught between dimensions when the collapse occurred, neither fully Nexus nor fully human. We became something new, something that exists in both realities simultaneously. The miniature Aurora pulsed with renewed energy, expanding further as false Blythe smiled. We don't need doorways anymore. We are the doorways. As if responding to his words, the dozens of infiltrators throughout the facility suddenly stopped fighting. They stood perfectly still, their bodies beginning to glow with the same blue-green energy as the aurora between the pendants. "They're amplifying the signal," Dr. Disgora gasped from where she'd taken cover nearby. "Creating a network, a living doorway system." False Blythe placed both hands on the containment glass now, his body illuminating from within. "Your father understood what was coming. That's why he left the pendants, not just to warn you, but to give you a chance. One final choice." Through the expanding energy field, my father's image became almost solid, his voice finally audible though distorted. "Jolie, the pendants contain the formula atmospheric stabilization for both worlds. Coexistence without replacement, but only if." His words cut off as false. Blythe made a dismissive gesture. Always the idealist, Ferris. Still believing worlds can share when one is clearly dying. He turned to me, his features beginning to shift subtly into something less than human. "Your father's plan would save both worlds, but require sacrifice from both. Our way is simpler. The strong survive." Around us, the hybrid beings began to change. Not the violent, unstable transformations I'd witnessed before, but a controlled metamorphosis into something that retained human appearance, while incorporating elements clearly not from Earth-slight elongations of limbs, subtle shifts in facial structure, eyes that reflected light like polished stone. "What are they doing?" Fearman whispered, her weapon trained on false Blythe despite the futility. "Becoming the next evolutionary step." "Doctor," Disgora answered, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding her fear. "A hybrid species perfectly adapted to Earth's atmosphere while retaining Nexus physiological advantages." False Blythe smiled, confirming her assessment. "Your father discovered that our worlds were once connected, part of the same dimensional plane, until a cosmic event separated them billions of years ago. We evolved differently, but from the same original source material. Compatible at the quantum level." He gestured to his transformed body. "Perfect integration is possible. We've proven it. By killing and replacing humans," I countered, anger overriding caution. "A regrettable first approach," he acknowledged without remorse. "But now unnecessary. The convergence offers a better way." As if on cue, the miniature aurora suddenly expanded exponentially, engulfing the entire containment chamber in swirling blue-green energy. Alarms blared anew as monitoring equipment registered unprecedented power levels. Through the chaos, I could see my father more clearly than ever, his expression desperate as he tried to communicate something about the pendants. "What's happening?" Bingley demanded as the facility's structure groaned under some immense pressure. False Blythe's expression became almost reverent. "The beginning. Dimensional resonance cascading across all 27 focal points simultaneously. The walls between worlds are thinning everywhere. Outside the facility windows, the night sky suddenly blazed with light, the aurora returning with impossible intensity, covering the entire visible sky, rather than just the northern horizon. Similar reports would later confirm the same phenomenon, appearing simultaneously worldwide, even at the equator where such displays had never been seen. The containment glass cracked, then shattered as the energy field expanded beyond its confines. The pendants, still floating in mid-air, pulsed with increasingly urgent rhythm. "Take cover!" Fearman shouted, pulling me down as the energy wave swept outward. But instead of destruction, the wave passed through solid matter like light through glass, leaving everything intact but somehow changed. Colors seemed more vivid, sounds more layered, as if my senses were suddenly processing more information than was previously possible. In the center of the room, where the containment chamber had stood, a perfect sphere of swirling energy now hovered, a stable micro-dimension, where the laws of both worlds existed simultaneously. Within it, my father stood, no longer spectral but fully corporeal, alongside Dr. Williams and others from the Nexus I recognized. Opposite them, False Blythe and his hybrid forces gathered, the two groups facing each other across an invisible boundary. "The convergence point is stabilizing," Dr. Williams called out, her voice distorted but understandable. "Ferris, it's working exactly as you predicted." My father's eyes found mine across the dimensional boundary. "Jolie, the pendants, now." I moved without thinking, pushing past Fearman's restraining arm toward the floating crystals that had somehow remained suspended even as the containment chamber dissolved. As my hands closed around both one blue, one green knowledge flooded my consciousness in a torrent of information too vast to process conventionally. Atmospheric formulas, quantum resonance patterns, biological adaptation sequences. 20 years of my father's research compressed into instantaneous understanding. I saw his plan in its entirety, not just sealing the doorways, but preparing for this inevitable moment when the separated dimensions would naturally attempt to reconnect. "The pendants aren't just keys," I said, the knowledge pouring through me as the crystals grew warm in my palms. "They're templates, blueprints for a stable merger of both worlds." False Blythe lunged toward me, his movement blindingly fast yet somehow slowed by the strange physics of the convergence point. You don't understand what you're doing." But I did. Perhaps for the first time in my life, I understood everything. "The atmosphere of both worlds can be stabilized," I announced, the pendant, knowledge guiding my words. "The Nexus Sun's deterioration can be halted. Earth's ecosystem can be preserved while accommodating Nexus physiological needs." I held up the pulsing crystals, not by replacing one world with another, but by selective convergence allowing both to coexist in overlapping dimensional space. My father nodded from within the energy sphere, pride evident in his expression. "The pendants contain the calibration sequence, a third way, not invasion, not isolation integration." False Blythe's expression contorted with rage. "Integration surrenders our evolutionary advantage. We would be equals rather than superiors." "Exactly," my father replied simply. Around us, the facility began to transform, solid matter gaining the crystalline properties I'd seen in the Nexus while retaining its fundamental Earth characteristics. Outside, through windows that now resembled both glass and living crystal simultaneously, the landscape shimmered with new potential trees and rocks gaining subtle luminescence, while the sky deepened to a color between Earth's blue and the Nexus violet. "It's beautiful," Dr. Disgora whispered, her scientific mind already racing to understand the implications. Director Bingley, however, remained unconvinced. "You're changing our entire world without consent, without testing, without understanding the consequences." "The alternative is extinction," Dr. Williams countered from within the energy sphere. "For both worlds. The natural convergence was coming regardless dimensional barriers thinning over centuries. What we're doing is controlling it, directing it toward mutual survival rather than competition." "And who decides how this proceeds?" Bingley demanded. "Who controls this power?" My father stepped forward, the boundary of the energy sphere rippling around him. "No one person, no one species." He gestured to the pendants in my hands. "The templates require ongoing cooperation, constant recalibration based on the needs of both worlds. Forced symbiosis." False Blythe and his hybrid forces gathered, clearly calculating their options. "And if we reject this compromise, then the pendants will reverse the convergence," I said, the knowledge flowing through me with absolute certainty. "Returning both dimensions to isolation, the Nexus would continue dying. Earth would lose access to technologies that could solve climate change, energy crises, medicine. Both worlds would face separate extinctions instead of shared survival." The moment stretched, reality itself seeming to hold its breath as the choice hung in the balance. Around us, the facility continued its transformation. Neither fully Earth nor fully Nexus, but something unprecedented. The first structure in a new shared reality. False Blythe locked eyes with me, the calculation in his gaze inhuman yet undeniably intelligent. "You're asking us to surrender a victory already within our grasp." "I'm offering you a future without the need for victory or defeat," I corrected, the pendants warming further in my hands. "Survival through cooperation rather than dominance." What happened next would change the course of two worlds forever, opening questions about identity, evolution, and the nature of reality itself that would take generations to answer. The choice made in that transformed Alaska facility would spark conflicts and alliances unprecedented in human history, as Earth grappled with the revelation that it was not alone in the universe and never had been. As the pendants activated fully in my hands, beginning the controlled convergence that would gradually transform both worlds while preserving their essential characteristics, I finally understood what my father had known all along. The real secret hidden behind the aurora wasn't aliens or government conspiracies. It was something far more profound: the truth that evolution doesn't always reward the strongest or the most aggressive. Sometimes, survival depends on the ability to adapt, to cooperate, to transform alongside those we once considered separate from ourselves. And as the boundaries between dimensions thinned worldwide, humanity faced its greatest challenge yet: learning to see itself as part of something larger, a cosmic tapestry, where the lines between us and them were never as solid as we once believed. The pendants pulsed one final time in my hands, sending their template broadcast to all 27 convergence points across the globe. As reality itself began to reshape around us, I caught my father's eye across the dissolving boundary between worlds. "Is this what you planned all along?" I asked, as the facility continued its transformation around us. His smile held both triumph and uncertainty, the perfect expression for the unprecedented moment we faced. "I planned for possibility," he answered, as the boundaries between our worlds continued to fade. "What happens next is up to all of us." Above us, through the crystalline ceiling that had once been solid metal, the aurora blazed with colors never before seen on Earth, the first visual evidence of two realities learning to coexist in shared space. The first sign of a convergence that would ask questions no single world could answer alone.